Unit 10. The Father Who Was a Star. Before Bruce was born. Long before Bruce Lee became a legend, his father, Lee Hoi-choen, was already a household name in Hong Kong. Born in 1901, Lee wasn't just an actor. He was one of the pioneers of Cantonese opera, the traditional art form that combined music, acrobatics, and storytelling long before cinema took over. Imagine Broadway, martial arts, and Shakespeare rolled into one. That was the world Lee Hoi-choen ruled. He joined the Chung-Fung-Ming opera troupe as a young man, and within years he became a top-billed performer, known for his commanding stage presence and expressive voice. But what made him special wasn't just his fame, it was his mastery of balance. Cantonese opera required performers to combine precise footwork, controlled breathing, and emotional expression, much like a martial artist channeling energy through movement. This philosophy would later become the foundation for Bruce Lee's own artistic expression in film and combat. Lee Hoi-choen toured China extensively, performing for sold-out crowds who cheered for his graceful movements and powerful delivery. In an age before film and radio dominated, he was one of the few entertainers who could move an audience with nothing but his body and voice. People didn't just watch Lee Hoi-choen, they felt him, and that sense of commanding presence, of being able to fill a room with charisma, was something Bruce inherited. It wasn't genetics, it was observation. As a little boy backstage, Bruce watched his father's every move. Lee Hoi-choen often told his son, "Don't just act, live what you act." It was this philosophy that Bruce carried into every film he ever made. When you watch Bruce in Enter the Dragon or The Way of the Dragon, you're not just seeing kung fu. You're seeing the rhythm of a performer, a legacy passed down from an opera stage in old Hong Kong. Even in America, Bruce's instinct to command attention came straight from his father's training. It is no coincidence that Bruce's first job was also in entertainment. He started acting as a child in Hong Kong cinema, just like his father had done decades earlier. Lee Hoi-choen's reputation even helped open the door for Bruce's early roles. When casting directors heard the name Lee, they knew the child came from showbiz royalty. But behind that success was something deeper. A father who believed art was the purest form of discipline. He may not have been a martial artist, but he understood the same principle: perfection through repetition. He drilled this into Bruce's upbringing, not with swords and kicks, but with scripts and songs. Number 9. The Refugee Father Who Survived War and Revolution. If Lee Hoi-choen's life had ended there, he would have simply been remembered as a performer. But history had other plans. During the Japanese invasion of Hong Kong in 1941, Lee Hoi-choen's world was turned upside down. The once thriving opera scene was silenced by air raids, curfews, and occupation. His troupe was scattered, friends went missing, and theaters were bombed to rubble. And Lee and his wife, Grace Ho, faced starvation. Yet in the middle of chaos they made a decision that would change history: to bring a new life into the world. Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco in 1940, just months before the Japanese army invaded Hong Kong. His parents had been touring with the opera troupe in America, and Lee Hoi-choen performed at the Golden Gate Theater in San Francisco's Chinatown the very night before Bruce was born. Think about that. The father performing under bright lights while the mother gave birth backstage. Bruce was literally born into show business. But the timing was critical. By the time the Lees returned to Hong Kong, the city was at war. During the Japanese occupation, Lee Hoi-choen was arrested by occupying forces for refusing to perform in propaganda plays. He was held for several weeks, and though he was eventually released, the trauma changed him forever. He had seen friends killed, stages destroyed, and culture suppressed. From that point on, he treated his art not just as entertainment, but as survival, a way to keep identity alive in a world trying to erase it. That resilience became one of the cornerstones of Bruce Lee's philosophy. The idea of "be water, my friend," The belief in adapting to every obstacle was rooted in what Bruce saw in his father. Lee Hoi-choen didn't fight with fists. He fought with endurance, with creativity, with the refusal to give up his art no matter what the world threw at him. When the war ended, Lee Hoi-choen rebuilt his career from scratch. He went back to the opera stage and later began acting in films, transitioning seamlessly into the new medium of cinema. At a time when most opera stars struggled to adapt, he thrived again, proving that reinvention wasn't just a talent, it was a survival skill. It's a lesson Bruce never forgot. When Hollywood rejected him in the 1960s, Bruce didn't quit. He created his own path just as his father had done decades earlier. The DNA of reinvention ran through both men. Lee Hoi-choen rebuilt a shattered career in post-war Hong Kong. Bruce rebuilt the image of Asian masculinity in Western cinema. And behind every scene where Bruce stood strong against impossible odds, you can almost hear his father as silent advice, the echo of a performer who once survived bombs and hunger, yet still walked onto a stage and smiled. Lee Hoi-choen was more than a father. He was proof that art, perseverance, and identity could outlast even the darkest times. And unknowingly, through every struggle he survived, he was shaping the spirit of the son who would one day inspire the world. Lyric 8. The performer who taught Bruce Lee. His first discipline. Before Bruce Lee could throw a punch, he had already learned how to move, not from a martial arts master, but from his father's stage. Lee Hoi-choen's world revolved around discipline. Every movement, every line, every note in Cantonese opera was choreographed to perfection. To the audience, it looked like art. To the performers, it was military precision. And Bruce, the young boy watching from backstage, was the silent student of this world. In Cantonese opera, the body becomes a language. Actors train for years to express emotion with gestures and eye movement, to leap, twist, and balance flawlessly. Lee Hoi-choen wasn't just a singer, he was a master of physical storytelling, and that became Bruce's first form of physical education. Bruce learned to imitate his father's steps, to copy his rhythm, and to read an audience, not through fighting, but through feeling energy. When people talk about Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do philosophy, they often think it came solely from combat. But Lee Hoi-choen had planted that seed much earlier. His father believed performance was about flow, the seamless connection between mind and body. He would tell Bruce, "If you are rigid, you break. If you are fluid, you become infinite." Decades later, those same words echoed when Bruce said, "Be water, my friend." Lee Hoi-choen's daily routine was strict. He rehearsed for hours, refining even the smallest details of a scene. His perfectionism left an impression on Bruce, who carried that same intensity into his martial arts training. Friends who knew Bruce recalled how he would practice a single kick hundreds of times until it felt natural. That relentless pursuit of mastery was inherited, not invented. But there was another lesson, something less obvious. Lee Hoi-choen taught his son that true mastery wasn't just about technique, it was about emotion. He said, "A performance without feeling is an empty shell." When Bruce began choreographing his fight scenes later in life, he used the same philosophy. Each movement had to mean something. Each punch had to tell a story. You can see this influence in Bruce's acting style. In The Big Boss or Fist of Fury, he wasn't just fighting. He was performing pain, pride, and defiance. Those weren't movie moves. They were opera emotions translated into modern cinema. That's why audiences didn't just watch Bruce Lee. They felt him, the same way they once felt his father. And there's something poetic about that lineage. One man using the stage to express the struggle of his people, and his son using the screen to express the spirit of a generation. Two performers separated by eras, connected by rhythm, timing, and soul. Lyric 7. The complex family legacy behind the Lees. Every legend has roots, and the Lee family S roots were more complex than most people realize. Lee Hoi-choen wasn't just a performer from Hong Kong. He came from a long line of actors and musicians who had been part of southern China's opera circuit for generations. But what made his family story extraordinary was its cultural duality. Lee Hoi-choen married Grace Ho, a woman of Eurasian descent whose family background connected to the prestigious Ho-tung clan, one of Hong Kong's most influential families during the colonial period. Grace's father was part of the wealthy merchant elite, while her mother was of mixed Chinese and European heritage. In other words, Bruce Lee was born from two worlds, one rooted in ancient Chinese tradition and the other touched by Western modernity. That cultural mix would later define Bruce's entire identity, but it all began with his parents' marriage. For Lee Hoi-choen, marrying Grace Ho was both a love story and a social leap. At that time, the gap between entertainers and high society families was enormous. Performers were seen as lower class, wandering artists with unstable incomes. Yet Grace saw something beyond that. She saw the passion, the artistry, the strength behind Lee Hoi-choen's performance. The couple's union shocked both circles. The opera community whispered about the westernized lady marrying an actor, while the elite side of Hong Kong frowned upon the idea of their relative marrying a stage performer. But they didn't care. They built a life together based on resilience and art. Their home became a fusion of East and West. While Lee Hoi-choen performed ancient Cantonese tales on stage, Grace decorated their house with Western books, furniture, and ideas. Bruce Lee grew up surrounded by this blend: Confucian discipline from his father and modern individualism from his mother. This combination was the hidden engine behind Bruce's worldview. From his father, he inherited tradition, performance, and form. From his mother, he absorbed modern thinking, freedom, and rebellion. Together, they created a paradox: a boy deeply rooted in the East, yet destined to conquer the West. But it wasn't always easy. Lee Hoi-choen struggled to maintain financial stability after the war. There were times when performances paid little, and the family had to rely on help from Grace's relatives. Bruce saw both the dignity of hard work and the humiliation of class struggle. It taught him one crucial lesson: status means nothing if you don't earn it yourself. Lee Hoi-choen's pride often clashed with the reality of his position. Despite his fame on stage, he was still part of a profession looked down upon by society. That quiet frustration left an impression on young Bruce. He saw his father's talent go unrecognized outside the theater, and that planted a fire inside him. The drive to break barriers, to demand respect for his craft, and to show the world that an Asian man could stand shoulder to shoulder with anyone. Every time Bruce faced rejection in Hollywood, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for his father's dignity, for all the artists who had been dismissed because of where they came from. Lee Hoi-choen may never have lived to see his son's global fame, but his influence is everywhere in Bruce's story. From the way he moved, to the way he thought, to the way he refused to bow to limitations. Behind every dragon is the spark that lit the flame. And for Bruce Lee, that spark was Lee Hoi-choen, a man who carried the rhythm of an ancient stage and passed it down through blood, art, and soul. Mercure 6, the man who brought Bruce Lee into film before he could walk. Before Bruce Lee became a martial arts icon, he was already a movie star, literally from infancy. And it was all thanks to his father, Lee Hoi-choen. Few people know that Bruce's very first appearance on screen happened when he was just a baby, at only 3 months old. The film was called Golden Gate Girl, 1941, a Hong Kong-American co-production shot in San Francisco's Chinatown, where his father was performing with the Cantonese opera troupe. Lee Hoi-choen had been cast in a supporting role, and when the production needed a baby for a brief scene, he volunteered his newborn son. The director agreed, and just like that, Bruce Lee made his cinematic debut before he could even recognize a camera. That moment was symbolic. The father, a lifelong performer, quite literally handed the torch to his son before either of them knew how bright it would burn. When the war ended and the family returned to Hong Kong, Lee Hoi-choen resumed his career, this time stepping into the emerging film industry. Cantonese opera was in decline, and cinema was taking over as the dominant art form. While many of his peers resisted this change, Lee adapted quickly. He appeared in over 70 films throughout the 1940s and 1950s, often playing strong-willed men, fathers, and moral figures, roles that mirrored his real personality at home. It was during this time that Bruce, now a curious and energetic boy, began spending long hours on set with his father. He watched the crew adjust lighting, cameras roll, actors rehearse. It fascinated him, and the moment he saw his father perform, something clicked. He wanted to do it too. Soon after, Lee Hoi-choen began introducing Bruce to small roles in local films. Between the ages of 6 and 18, Bruce appeared in over 20 Hong Kong movies, often portraying mischievous kids or street-smart teens. This early exposure didn't just make him comfortable in front of a camera, it gave him a performer's instinct that few actors ever master. Lee Hoi-choen was careful, though. He didn't want Bruce to grow arrogant or spoiled by attention. He treated acting like craft, not celebrity. "You earn the stage," he would tell his son. "You don't own it." He taught Bruce that every role, big or small, deserved the same level of commitment. This humility would stay with Bruce even after fame arrived. Perhaps the most important lesson came not through words, but through observation. Bruce saw the way his father navigated the fragile life of an artist, balancing fame with responsibility, talent with discipline, and ambition with patience. It showed him that greatness wasn't luck. It was structure, persistence, and timing. By the time Bruce left for America in 1959, he had already spent nearly 2 decades absorbing those lessons. His confidence on film sets, his understanding of lighting and movement, even his calmness under pressure. All of it was a reflection of Lee Hoi-choen's early guidance. And while Bruce would later fuse martial arts with cinema in revolutionary ways, his foundation was built by an opera performer who once carried scripts instead of swords, and a baby who grew up between spotlights and shadows. Number 5. The hidden struggles behind the stage curtain. Behind the charisma and applause, Lee Hoi-choen's life was far from easy. For every standing ovation, there were nights of exhaustion, financial uncertainty, and quiet sacrifice. He was a man caught between 2 worlds, the glamorous image of a stage performer and the harsh reality of providing for a growing family in post-war Hong Kong. The entertainment industry in the 1940s and 1950s was unforgiving. Performers were paid per show, often with no job security, no medical insurance, and no guarantee of tomorrow's income. Lee Hoi-choen, despite being one of the most respected opera actors of his generation, was constantly on the move, performing across southern China, Macau, and Southeast Asia. He would spend weeks away from home, sometimes sending money through friends or letters. At home, Grace Ho managed the household, caring for Bruce and his siblings. But even she admitted later that there were days when food was scarce and rent was late. The glamour people saw on stage rarely matched their private struggles. Yet through it all, Lee Hoi-choen never stopped performing. He believed that art was not a privilege. It was a duty. Those hardships shaped Bruce's worldview. As a child, he saw how his father's public image contrasted with the struggles behind closed doors. He learned early that success came with sacrifice. When Bruce later trained for hours each day, bruising his body to achieve perfection, he was simply repeating the same endurance he'd watched in his father. But there was another kind of struggle, one that was more personal. The pressure of fame and the constant grind began to wear Lee Hoi-choen down. He developed health problems in his later years, including high blood pressure and respiratory issues from performing long hours in smoke-filled theaters. Yet he refused to slow down. His sense of duty to the stage and to his family kept him going. There's a story often told among older opera performers. One night, after collapsing backstage from exhaustion, Lee insisted on going back out for the final act. "The show must finish," he said. He performed the scene flawlessly, bowed to the audience, and only then allowed himself to be carried off to rest. That level of professionalism became the standard Bruce set for himself, never showing weakness, never quitting mid-fight, no matter how hard it got. Lee's later years were quieter, but not bitter. He took pride in watching his son develop both as an actor and martial artist. When Bruce started gaining recognition in America, teaching celebrities and appearing on television, Lee Hoi-choen reportedly said to a friend, "He has my spirit, but his own wings." Those wings, of course, would soon carry Bruce to unimaginable heights. But the foundation was built by a father who understood that greatness begins not in the spotlight, but in the shadows of struggle. Lee Hoi-choen's life was a testament to persistence. He endured war, poverty, rejection, and illness, yet he never lost his dignity or passion. That quiet resilience became part of Bruce's DNA. Every time Bruce faced a setback, from being rejected by Hollywood producers to suffering injuries that nearly ended his career, he drew strength from the image of his father, standing tall, costume-heavy, eyes burning with purpose, refusing to bow before life's stage curtain fell. 4. The father who turned pain into philosophy. Every great artist carries a wound, and for Lee Hoi-choen, that wound was the harshness of life itself. The stage gave him applause, but it also took pieces of him. The constant travel, the endless rehearsals, the sacrifices he made for his art left deep marks. But rather than letting that pain destroy him, he turned it into wisdom. The same wisdom that later shaped Bruce Lee's entire life philosophy. Lee Hoi-choen believed that life was not about avoiding suffering, but mastering it. He would tell Bruce, "A good performance must come from truth, and truth is never without pain." That sentence stayed with Bruce for the rest of his life. It became part of his own creative code. Don't pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. Growing up, Bruce saw his father struggle with aging, poverty, and the changing world of entertainment. The old opera houses were closing, the movie studios were shifting toward younger faces, and Lee Hoi-choen's glory days were fading. Yet instead of bitterness, he responded with grace. He would still get up early, practice his breathing, stretch his joints, and rehearse lines even when he had no performance scheduled. To Bruce, this was more than routine. It was discipline turned into art. His father wasn't practicing for fame anymore. He was practicing for self-respect. That lesson became Bruce's spiritual backbone. The idea that mastery is not a goal but a lifestyle came straight from watching his father live it. In one old interview, Grace Ho mentioned that Lee Hoi-choen used to meditate before every show. He believed that stillness before action gave him control. This concept would later reappear in Bruce's teachings, where he often emphasized inner calm before physical expression. "Empty your mind," Bruce said, but it was something he'd seen long before he could articulate it. Even the way Lee handled emotion influenced Bruce's on-screen style. In Cantonese opera, an actor must balance dramatic expression with restraint. Too little emotion feels hollow. Too much becomes chaos. That perfect midpoint where control meets intensity became Bruce's signature. When he glared into the camera during a fight scene, there was fire, but behind that fire was composure. That came from Lee. But perhaps the most powerful philosophical inheritance was this. Lee Hoi-choen saw art as truth. He believed an artist's job wasn't just to entertain, but to reveal something about life. The joy, the sorrow, the constant fight between illusion and reality. He told Bruce, "The audience doesn't come to see you win. They come to see you feel." That simple line became a hidden philosophy in Bruce's acting and teaching. When he performed, whether it was on-screen combat or a simple monologue, he poured raw emotion into it, not to impress, but to connect. His father's influence was invisible but ever present. like a guiding hand shaping the rhythm of his every move. By the time Bruce reached adulthood, he no longer saw Lee Hoi-choen merely as a father. He saw him as a living parable, a man who faced life's tragedies with courage and turned each defeat into a performance worth remembering. That mindset, transforming pain into power, became one of the defining qualities of Bruce Lee's philosophy and his art. Number 3. The father who fought tradition with art. Lee Hoi-choen may not have fought physical battles, but he spent his entire life challenging invisible walls, the barriers of class, culture, and expectation. In early 20th century China, performing arts were often dismissed as lowly professions. Actors, musicians, and opera singers were considered social outsiders. Yet Lee Hoi-choen refused to accept that label. He came from a humble background in Guangdong province, but he never saw that as a limitation. Instead, he turned performance into protest. On stage, he portrayed noble heroes, scholars, and warriors, roles traditionally reserved for the elite. Through his craft, he redefined what dignity meant. When audiences saw Lee perform, they didn't see a poor actor. They saw strength, intelligence, and pride. This quiet defiance shaped how Bruce viewed identity. From a young age, Bruce watched his father earn respect not through power or money, but through mastery. That idea, that self-improvement could transcend social status, became central to Bruce's worldview. It's why, when Hollywood later tried to confine him to stereotypes, Bruce rebelled. He wouldn't play servants or villains just to fit in. He had inherited his father's fight against limitation. Lee Hoi-choen also broke tradition within his own art form. Cantonese opera was built on strict conventions, stylized movements, symbolic gestures, rigid vocal structures. But Lee often pushed those boundaries. He experimented with tempo, altered staging, and added realism to emotional scenes. Purists criticized him, but audiences loved it. He was among the first to make opera feel human rather than mythical. That same instinct for innovation lived on in Bruce. Jeet Kune Do, Bruce's personal martial art, was essentially the same rebellion, a rejection of rigid systems in favor of freedom and truth. Where traditional martial arts demanded conformity, Bruce demanded adaptability. Absorb what is useful, discard what is not, he said. The philosophy wasn't new. It was evolution. It was his father's legacy, reborn in motion. Even their creative struggles mirrored each other. Lee Hoi-choen battled the establishment of the opera world, while Bruce battled Hollywood's racial stereotypes. Both refused to be defined by others' expectations. Both paid the price for their defiance. Lee with professional isolation in his later years, Bruce, with Hollywood's rejection before Enter the Dragon, finally broke through. Yet neither man ever abandoned his art. For Lee Hoi-choen, the stage was more than a career. It was a battlefield for dignity. For Bruce, the screen became the same. Each time he faced the camera, he was continuing a generational fight for authenticity. There's an old Cantonese proverb Lee often quoted to his son: "A man without a stage is a man without a face." It wasn't about fame. It was about purpose, having something worth standing for. Bruce carried that line with him through life. Every performance, every philosophy, every interview he gave echoed the same belief, that true respect isn't granted by society, but earned through excellence. By teaching his son to find meaning in art, Lee Hoi-choen gave him something far greater than fame or fortune. He gave him identity, and that identity, built on courage and creation, became Bruce Lee's greatest weapon. 2. The father who feared his own son's greatness. By the late 1950s, Bruce Lee was no longer the mischievous child who played around his father's stage. He had grown into a young man with energy that couldn't be contained. While Lee Hoi-choen loved his son deeply, he also began to feel something every great parent eventually feels: the mix of pride and fear when the child begins to outgrow the master. Bruce was rebellious. He questioned authority, refused tradition, and challenged ideas, even his father's. Where Lee Hoi-choen valued discipline and restraint, Bruce valued freedom and individuality. The two men were alike in spirit, but different in expression. And as Bruce entered his teenage years, their relationship grew tense. Bruce often got into street fights in Hong Kong, using techniques he learned from friends and local martial artists. Lee Hoi-choen, horrified, worried that his son's energy was going to destroy his future. He would scold Bruce harshly, saying, "You have my fire, but none of my control." It wasn't anger, it was fear. The world he had survived through art and patience was not the same world Bruce was entering. There's a story Grace Ho once shared. One night, Bruce came home after a brawl with another teenager. His face was bruised, his knuckles bleeding. Lee Hoi-choen sat in silence for a long time, then simply said, "If you keep fighting with your hands, the world will fight you back. Learn to fight with your mind." Those words hit Bruce hard. He didn't show it then, but he never forgot them. Years later, when Bruce developed Jeet Kune Do, he used that exact idea as his foundation, that real combat begins with the mind. In time, Lee Hoi-choen came to understand that Bruce's defiance wasn't DT rebellion against him, it was evolution. He realized that the same fire that once made him an icon of the opera stage was now blazing in his son, only in a new form. One used his voice to challenge society, the other used his body. Both were artists, both were fighters, and both refused to live small. As Bruce prepared to leave for America in 1959, father and son shared a quiet moment at home. Lee Hoi-choen, by then older and frailer, looked at Bruce and said softly, "Go where your art takes you, but don't lose your roots." Bruce nodded. That was their last conversation before Bruce left Hong Kong. It's unclear whether Lee fully understood how far his son would go, but deep down he knew he was witnessing something extraordinary. He had once dreamed of breaking free from the narrow world of Cantonese opera. Now his son would break free from the limits of an entire culture. Pride and fear intertwined. The father who once ruled the stage was handing the stage to a new generation. Bruce's journey to America, his struggle for recognition, and his transformation into a global icon all carried the invisible blessing of that farewell. Behind the dragon's roar was a father's quiet whisper, "Be true to your art." Number 1. The legacy that outlived them both. Lee Hoi-choen passed away in 1965, 2 years before the Green Hornet turned Bruce Lee into an international sensation. He never lived to see his son become the most famous martial artist in the world, but in many ways, he didn't need to. His legacy was already alive within Bruce long before the fame came. When Bruce's films exploded globally in the early 1970s, millions saw his speed, charisma, and philosophy as revolutionary. But those who knew his family recognized something familiar: the poise, the timing, the presence. They saw the opera actor reborn in his son's motion. Lee Hoi-choen had been the first to teach Bruce that every gesture carries meaning, every silence builds tension, every movement tells a story. That's why Bruce's fight scenes felt like poetry, because they were performances, choreographed with the same theatrical rhythm his father once used on stage. Even Bruce's global philosophy echoed his father's spirit. Lee Hoi-choen believed that art was universal, that emotion transcended culture. In his day, he performed for audiences across Asia who spoke different dialects, yet they all understood him because art spoke one language. Bruce would later prove that idea on an even greater scale, turning martial arts films into a universal experience that transcended language and nationality. The Lee legacy was not built on strength or violence. It was built on artistry, the ability to connect, to express, to move people. Father and son, though separated by time and form, were two sides of the same coin. One gave art to the East, the other gave philosophy to the world. It's easy to forget that before Bruce Lee became the Dragon, he was Lee Hoi-choen's son, a boy raised backstage among painted masks, silk costumes, and the echoes of Cantonese melodies. Every punch Bruce threw had rhythm. Every shout had tone. Every scene he played carried the soul of performance. That was his father's blood moving through him. And when Bruce passed away suddenly in 1973, the tragedy struck deeper because it felt like a story repeating itself. Two artists, two generations, both giving their entire lives to their craft, both gone too soon, leaving behind legacies larger than life. Yet their influence never died. Every time Bruce's philosophy inspires a new generation to break barriers, Lee Hoi-choen's spirit lives again. Every student who studies Jeet Kune Do and finds meaning beyond combat is unknowingly following a path first walked by a Cantonese opera star who believed that art, whether sung, acted, or fought, is the purest form of truth. Lee Hoi-choen was more than just Bruce Lee's father. He was the origin, the first spark that ignited a fire the world still feels today. He taught through silence, through art, and through resilience. And that's why understanding Bruce Lee means understanding the man who came before him. Because without Lee Hoi-choen, there would be no Bruce Lee. There would be no dragon. There would only be a world still waiting for someone to teach it how to move and how to feel again. If you like this video, don't forget to hit like and share it with your friends who love uncovering hidden legends behind iconic figures. Subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any deep stories behind history's greatest names. Join our community for exclusive videos, behind-the-scenes content, and member-only discussions. And if you'd like to support our channel directly, tap the Super Thanks button below. Every bit of support helps us keep bringing you untold stories like this one. See you in the next video.